We are doing a lecture series on vectors. I have already delivered one lecture on vectors. It is a second lecture. It will take a few more lectures before we complete lecture series on vectors. Today I will discuss parallelogram law of vector addition, polygon law of vector addition, how the two vectors are subtracted, and a few examples. So let me start with parallelogram law of vector addition. Let me start with the parallelogram law of vector addition. Point number 1. Parallelogram law of vector addition. I have already given you triangular law of vector addition. Two vectors, the tail of the second vector is placed on the tip of the first vector, and then you connect the tail of the first to the head of the second vector. That is the triangular law of vector addition. But there is one more technique through which we can add two vectors. That's called as parallelogram law of vector addition. So how we add two vectors? By using this technique. तो इसमें क्या करेंगे, आप दो वेक्टर लेंगे, जो दो वेक्टरों को आपको ऐड करना हो, उन दो वेक्टर को हम लेते हैं. लेट मी से दिस इज वेक्टर ए एंड दिस इज वेक्टर बी, and the angle between the two vectors is theta. And here we have to connect the tail of the two vectors together here at this point. And these are the two vectors, vector A and vector B. Now we will make a parallelogram out of these two vectors. The parallelogram is like this, something like this. This has become a parallelogram. So when you make a parallelogram out of these two vectors in this way, तो फिर क्या करेंगे, आप इस पॉइंट को लेकर के इस पॉइंट तक आप ज्वाइन कर लो. दिस वन, दिस vector C is the resultant of these two vectors. The technique is very simple. Get the two vectors, connect their tails, make a parallelogram out of those two vectors, and then the longest diagonal, this one, starting from the origin to this point, this vector gives us the resultant of these two vectors. So we can write here vector C is equal to vector A plus vector B. This is the correct equation that we are going to write. So what is the magnitude of C again? Again, the magnitude of C is given by the same rule, that is root of A square plus B square plus 2AB cos of theta. And a direction is this, what the resultant makes with one of the vectors. चाहे वेक्टर ए लीजिए आप या वेक्टर बी लीजिए आप, हमें देखना है ये जो रिजल्टेंट है ये दो में से एक वेक्टर के साथ क्या एंगल बनाता है. अगर वो एंगल हमने फाइंड किया तो हम समझेंगे हमने रिजल्टेंट वेक्टर का डायरेक्शन फाइंड किया. सो लेट इट बी अल्फा. तो tan alpha is equal to perpendicular like this and base like this. This perpendicular we already know, that is B sin theta, and base we already know, this part plus this part, that is A plus B cos of theta. So this is the technique, parallelogram law of vector addition. So again I will repeat, you have to connect the two vectors, you have to connect the tail of the two vectors and define angle between the two vectors, make a parallelogram out of these two vectors, and when you make the parallelogram, then you join the origin to the end, to this end. This resultant will give you the sum of the two vectors. Here it was very simple to find the difference of the two vectors. If you connect this tip and tip, that will give you the difference of these two vectors. But that is a separate thing that I will discuss separately. Okay. Now, let me go to the polygon law of vector addition. Point number 2. Polygon law of vector addition. How that is done, polygon law of vector addition. In polygon law of vector addition, what we do is, we can add too many vectors. Too many vectors can be added by the polygon law of vector addition. Something like this. Suppose as polygon law of vector addition. Law of vector addition. It's a technique by which we can add many vectors. You have so many vectors, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the vectors can be added up in a single geometrical way. तो वो कैसे होगा? जैसे अगर मेरे पास वेक्टर A है और मैं इसको B के साथ ऐड करना चाहता हूँ. You get the vector B, tail of the vector B, and put that tail on the head of the vector A. Something like this. Then you have one more vector C. Put it like this. Suppose you have one more vector you want to add to these vectors. Okay, vector D. And I want to add these vectors. But every time you have to put the tail of the vector on the head of the preceding vector. तो इन चार वेक्टरों का रिजल्टेंट क्या है? तो that is very simple. You have to connect the tail of the first to the head of the maybe second, maybe third, maybe fourth, head of the fourth vector. So this is the resultant, which you call as R. So polygon law of vector addition is simple, that if you want to add too many vectors, you connect the tail of the first to the head of the last. And then what's the equation that I am going to write for this case? इसके लिए मैं क्या इक्वेशन लिख सकता हूँ? तो वो इक्वेशन है, this resultant R is equal to A plus B plus C plus D. This is the equation that you can write. But you can't say magnitude R is magnitude A plus magnitude B plus magnitude C plus magnitude D. That you can't write. From here you see that the length of R is lesser than either of the magnitudes of the vectors. So magnitude of can be lesser than D, C, A, or B, or it can be even greater. So there's no such rule as you can no relation between the magnitudes unless you find them actually. So this is what you call as polygon law of vector addition. Okay, well, there's one more case for this polygon law of vector addition. Suppose vectors, those I want to add up, they close up on themselves. What do we mean by closing on themselves? That is, if I have vectors like this, vector A, and I add to the vector B, resultant is connecting the tail of first to the head of the second, right? So that will be this part. This part will be the resultant of these two. But suppose I have one more vector C, and I want to add these three vectors. This will be the resultant, this one from tail to the head of C. Suppose there is one more, that is D. Then this will be the resultant, and mark it well, the resultant तो short होता जा रहा है. तो ये कोई बात नहीं हुई कि resultant should always be greater. Resultant can be even lesser. तो अगर आप और एक vector, that is vector E, the resultant becomes even shorter. Suppose you have one more vector. So the tip of the last vector that you want to add touches the tail of the first vector. So this is what you call as vectors close on themselves. तो इस सूरत में क्या है? तो resultant तो कुछ है नहीं, because you can't connect the tail of the first to the head of the last because they touch each other. तो इस सूरत में क्या है? So when vectors close on themselves and tip of the last touches the tail of the first, the resultant of all these vectors is 0. The resultant, let me write it down. The resultant is 0. When? The resultant is 0 when vectors close on themselves. When vectors close up. When vectors close up. That's all. It is the application of this polygon law of vector addition. That's all. So let me go to one more concept, that is subtraction of two vectors. How do we subtract two vectors? So there's a simple technique, third point, that I want to discuss with you. Subtraction of two vectors. How to subtract two vectors? The technique is very simple. Have a look. Actually, in vectors, वेक्टर एडिशन और वेक्टर सब्ट्रैक्शन 2 ऑपरेशंस नहीं है, बेसिकली ये वेक्टर एडिशन ही है। तो वेक्टर सब्ट्रैक्शन का कोई नया ऑपरेशन नहीं है। हाउ इज दैट? सपोज आई वांट टू ऐड 2 वेक्टर्स। फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल लेट मी राइट इट डाउन, subtraction of 2 vectors. Subtraction of 2 vectors. How to subtract 2 vectors? We know addition of 2 vectors is like this. This is the addition of 2 vectors. If I replace B, vector B, if we replace vector B by minus B, the job is done. So vector B को minus vector B से replace कीजिए. So what we do, what we write, vector C resultant is A again plus, that means you are adding it, but not to B but to minus B. That becomes A minus B. That's all. So you have to add again 2 vectors. You have to add vector A not to vector B, but you have to add vector A to the negative of B. That's all. So again, what is the magnitude now of the difference of the 2 vectors? Magnitude C is equal to, again, root of A square plus B square plus 2A minus B cos of theta. So what you do is you replace in that equation, addition equation, vector magnitude B by minus B. So what you get finally is root of A square plus B square minus 2AB cos of theta. That's all. So this is the rule of vector subtraction. So in other words, if you have 2 vectors, A and B, you want to find the magnitude of their subtraction. So what you do is this. So simple. 2 vectors, I want to subtract the 2 vectors. एक वेक्टर समझो ये वेक्टर A है और ये वेक्टर B है, तो मुझे इनको सब्ट्रैक्ट करना है। जो इनका सब्ट्रैक्शन होगा, रिजल्टेंट ऑफ देयर सब्ट्रैक्शन, दैट विल आल्सो बी ए वेक्टर। उस वेक्टर का मैग्नीट्यूड भी होगा, उस वेक्टर का डायरेक्शन भी होगा। वी हैव टू फाइंड बोथ। सो हाउ टू फाइंड देम? हैव ए लुक। एंगल बिटवीन A and B is theta. So what is the subtraction of the 2 vectors? That is obtained by connect their tips. These tips are to be connected. This is A minus B. So the magnitude of A minus B, let me suppose that is C, is this length from here to here. This is the difference of the 2 vectors, having this as the direction, this tip as the direction, this one. So what is the magnitude of C? That is very simple, root, again this A square plus B square minus 2AB cos of theta. Geometrically you can find, when you connect the 2 tips, this length will be the magnitude of the difference of the 2 vectors. Yes, if the tip is here, it is A minus B. If this tip is here, then it is B minus A. Okay, and what about the direction? Alpha. Let this vector make angle alpha with A. That is again tan inverse B sin theta plus A minus B cos theta. Or you can find the direction of this vector geometrically. You can geometrically find the direction of this vector from the geometry itself. That will be very simple. Instead of writing a formula, it is better to find it there from the diagram. What is the direction of the difference of the 2 vectors? So it becomes finally very simple. You have the 2 vectors, connect their tails, stretch them in different directions, connect their tips. When you connect their tips, that length will be the magnitude of the difference of the 2 vectors. That is all about subtraction of 2 vectors. Okay, let me go to a few examples. Let me go to the few examples so that we can apply these rules and laws, actually solving the problems and objectives on vectors. So how we do that? कैसे हम करेंगे वो सब. चलो, let me start with simple cases. Point number 4, okay. An example. If I have two vectors A and B and their resultant is, okay, their resultant is C. This is a condition number 1. I am summing the two vectors and their resultant is C, okay. And given condition, if A square plus B square is equal to C square. This is one more given condition. It is given condition. It is given condition. So the question is that if the resultant of two vectors is C, and if the square of the magnitude of the first vector plus square of the magnitude of the second vector is equal to square of the resultant, magnitude of the resultant. In that case, the question is, what is the angle sorry, what is the angle between A vector and B vector? Sorry. This is the question. So how to proceed solving this question? कैसे हम इस question को solve करेंगे? The procedure is very simple. First of all, what is the magnitude C? That is magnitude A plus B together magnitude. This is the correct way of writing things. Not that magnitude C is magnitude A plus magnitude B separately. No. Magnitude of A plus B. If you proceed ahead, that is magnitude C, or you can write it simply C like this. I have already told you, you can write it like this, and it will be here root of magnitude of this A square plus B square plus 2AB cos of theta. Okay. Now, if I square both sides, I will be getting C square is equal to A square plus B square plus 2AB cos of theta. So simple if you just square the two sides. Now, if you square the two sides, from the left side, I can write this A square plus B square because it is given. So here it is A square plus B square is equal to again A square plus B square plus 2AB cos of theta. It will get off. It will be cancelled. So what is the final equation that I am going to write? 2AB cos of theta is equal to, from the left side there is nothing left, it is 0. So what should I write? What should I write now? Okay, I should write 2AB cos theta is equal to 0, and that will make cos theta is equal to 0. That will make theta equal to 90 degrees, because you know cos of 90 is 0. That's the answer. We got the answer, and we have solved the maybe you call it problem, or you may call it just an objective, which may be likely to be asked in some exams at the national level. This is the answer. Okay, let me go to the fifth example, fifth point, that is, suppose I have two forces. Fifth example, suppose I have two forces. The forces of both the magnitudes of both the forces are given. The condition is like this. Suppose I have a force F1 that is, okay, 3P, and I have F2 that is 2P. Magnitude of this force is 3P and magnitude of the second force is 2P. Now, if I double this force, this one, what happens? The resultant gets doubled in magnitude. The resultant gets doubled in magnitude. So I will write it down here. If F1 is doubled, the magnitude of the resultant, also gets doubled. Now what is the question? The question is, In that case, I have to find what should be the angle between this vector and this vector. What is the angle between F1 and F2 if they are just forces? Because force is a vector. So the question is, what is the angle between F1 and F2? That is all. So let us solve this question by the techniques or by the rules that we have learned so far. तो क्या करेंगे हम? क्या करना चाहिए? Okay, resultant F is equal to F1 plus F2. That is the first equation that I can write. The correct way of writing the vector equation. So the next part is magnitude of F is equal to magnitude F1 magnitude F2. Right? The third equation that I can write. If I don't write these two lines and a vector notation, I can just write it F is equal to, it is the resultant of these two. तो क्या लिखूं इसका मैं? What should I write? हाँ, F1 square plus F2 square plus 2 times F1 F2 cos of theta. Where theta is the angle between F1 and F2, which we have to find. So here it is root of this. If I square both sides, what I am going to get? I am going to get F square is equal to F1 square plus F2 square plus 2 times F1 F2 cos of theta. This is I am going to write by squaring. So this is the equation that I have. Now what I will do, जो मेरा condition है दिया हुआ condition है वो इसमें मैं डालूंगा. I want to put the condition here in the equation. So what should happen, and what is going to happen in that case? So let me rub it off. Okay. So what is the question is, F square is equal to, what was F1? That was 3p, that is square of, that is 9p square. F2, that was 2p as 4p square करके plus 2 into 3p into 2p cos of theta. That is, I can write, resultant is F. When one force is 3p, square करके ये और ये, and you can just substitute these. Now, the question is, if this first force that was F1, अगर उसको डबल किया जाए तो resultant डबल हो जाता है. तो मैं क्या लिखूं इसका F का? In the second case, that is 2f square. This resultant becomes double, that is 4f square is equal to, and the first force that was 3p is doubled, that is 3p, that becomes 6p when we double it, but here it is square F1, though that is 36p square. Second is the same as 4p square plus 2 into 6p into 2p cos of theta. These are the two equations. And by dividing these two equations, that will be a simpler way. Otherwise, I have to substitute here F, but that will be a little length here. तो इनको divide कीजिए आप. अगर मैं इन दो equations को divide करूँगा like this, divide करूँगा, तो क्या मिलेगा मुझे? 1/4 is equal to, this is 9 plus 4, that is 13p square plus 2 to 4, 3, 12p square cos theta divided by, it is 36 plus 4, that is 20p square plus 24p square cos theta. So if I put p square common here, that will cancel off. So what is the simplest equation that I am to get a final result what is the final result that I am going to get? The final result is, you see, that is 20 plus 24 cos theta. When we cross it here, 24 cos theta is equal to 13 plus 12 cos theta. Now it is no, it is multiply 52 plus 48 cos of theta. Now you get 48 here, that is 24, 48, that is minus 24 cos theta, and 52 minus 20, that is, what is that? That is 2, that is 32, possibly, yes. So what about theta? Here I committed a mistake, sorry, it is 4, it is 0, it is 4, it was 4 here, 4 here, just a minute, it is 40 plus 24, it is 52, 20, 48, it is 48 here, it is minus 24 cos theta, and it's 52 minus 40, that is minus 24 cos theta is equal to 12 here, it is cos theta is equal to minus 1 by 2, minus 1 by 2. So cos theta minus 1 by 2 means theta is 120 degrees, that you must know, because when cos theta is minus 1 by 2, theta has to be 120 degrees. That is all for today, and tomorrow I will be giving more and more lectures on this vector so that we can complete it. Now there is dot product and cross product and a few more examples, and finally you will get to know full vectors. Thank you. This